Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So today's video, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that is wedding timelines. And this is primarily for those of you who are planning a wedding without a wedding planner or a day of coordinator or someone that will do your wedding day timeline for you if you are having to create this for yourself. So today we're talking about the most common mistakes that I see when it comes to making your wedding day timeline for couples that are creating their own day of timeline. So if you've watched a lot of my videos, especially anything that has to do with the day of the wedding, you've probably heard me yap on and on about wedding day timelines and their importance. It's probably one of my favorite parts of my job. I just love scheduling everything out and seeing it all on paper. You can see from the very first thing that's happening that day to the very last thing that's happening, and it just makes me feel so much more, obviously organized, but just, I feel like it just takes a load off of having everything written down, planned out. You know when everyone's gonna arrive, you know when everything's happening. And if you're not having a wedding day coordinator, this is going to make your life a lot easier and ensure that your day runs smoother, even if you just have this written out that you can share with other people. So mistake number one is not making a timeline at all. Now, what I mean for a wedding day timeline, if you're unfamiliar with this term, that is actually mapping out what your entire day is going to look like. And I'm not just talking about your ceremony start time through the night and whatever schedule you're putting on your wedding website. So this goes way more in depth, starting with typically when hair and makeup will start, as that is likely the first thing to happen on the day of your wedding. So whatever is happening first, arrival of rentals, anything like that, up until the very end of the night, the last song, what time you have to be out of your venue, and all of that and everything in between. So this will be vendor arrival times. This will be what time your photography is going to start, what time your bridal wedding party needs to be ready for photos. Anything schedule-wise, timing related will go into one document, and that is your wedding day timeline. So when creating this, mistake number two that I see is not including your vendor arrival times into the wedding timeline. So as you're communicating with your vendors leading up to the wedding day, you wanna make sure that you are explicitly communicating their arrival time so that it is expected on the day of, so that you know when they will arrive and when to expect them. So maybe you have somebody that's kind of on standby to either greet them or give them any sort of instruction if you're in hair and makeup and can't see them yourself. And also so that you're not concerned if a vendor isn't there by a specific time, or on the flip side, you know when to be concerned. So if you know when a vendor is supposed to arrive and it reaches that point of the day and they're not there, then that's when you want to take some follow-up action and have somebody maybe reach out, or you yourself, and know kind of when to start worrying rather than just thinking, oh, I feel like the caterer should be here by now, and not actually knowing exactly when they were planning to arrive. So make sure you are having that conversation with your vendors beforehand and including their arrival times on your day of timeline. Number three is not communicating your idea of your timeline with your photographer before scheduling it. So a lot of times your photographer will be a great assistance in creating this wedding day timeline and making sure that things will kind of run smoothly. They will know how long specific things need to take, especially like family portraits, how long to allot for that, getting ready pictures, all of that sort of thing. So a lot of times they'll have kind of a shell of a timeline that you can work off of. So just make sure that if you are creating a timeline, you are working cohesively with your photographer to make sure they line up so that you're not planning for things at a different time than they are. This also goes for lighting. If you're planning for sunset or golden hour photos, this could vary depending on your venue and what the light might be like. So this is where your photographer is going to be knowledgeable on that too. So just make sure that you are coordinating with them to make sure that both your timelines line up. Similarly, number four is not communicating your timeline with any of your vendors or with any other vendors. So once you have this timeline pretty secure, shoot that off to every single vendor that's going to be a part of your wedding day so that everyone is on the same page and they know what time things are happening, or if there's any questions that you're able to solidify that and communicate that before your wedding day, and that on the day of, things are going to run a lot smoother that way. Number 5 is not including any buffer time. So you might have an idea of how long things are going to take, and then you're working off of that specific time frame for your entire evening. But if one little thing gets pushed back for whatever reason, if something, rain delay, if anything happens that sets you back a little bit, then that affects everything that's going to happen for the remainder of your wedding day. So it's important to include some buffer time so that if something is going a little bit off schedule, it's not going to ruin the trajectory of the rest of your wedding day or affect other vendors, the condition of your food and when it's going to be served or anything like that. So my favorite places to include buffer time is in the ceremony and cocktail hour time. So if you're just having a pretty standard ceremony, not a full church service, I usually plan for like 30 minutes for that time slot, and realistically, from start to finish, this really typically only takes like 15 to 20 minutes max. So having that 30-minute time slot does account for a little bit of buffer time right there. And then also the cocktail hour, I will usually do like an hour and 10 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes from the time that cocktail hour starts to the time that dinner is served. So usually about a 2-hour window if your ceremony and reception are in the same space. A 2-hour window from the start time of your ceremony to the start time of when dinner is served gives you a little bit of buffer time in there if you're planning for like a 20-ish minute ceremony and then a 1-hour cocktail hour if your ceremony runs a little bit long, or if you're taking photos during your cocktail hour and it takes a little bit longer. That's not going to affect your dinner start time or anything that's going to happen after that. Additionally, I also like to include buffer time during like the toast / first dances. So that way it's not just like boom, 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 you're running one thing after another, doing dinner, then toast, then dance, then cake cutting, or whatever it's going to be, one after another. So again, if one thing is running behind, it doesn't set the entire evening behind. It also kind of helps with the flow of if you're having to start toasts a little bit late or early and guests haven't finished eating yet, or they want to go back for seconds, or people are just wanting to sit and enjoy, you have a little bit of time after toasts are done before just hopping into the next thing. So include a little bit of buffer time for the duration of your toasts, as well as like during before your first dances happen, like cake cutting, moving into the first dance is usually a good time to include some buffer time there. Number 6 is not thoroughly reading your vendor contracts. So not knowing if there are specific time constraints within certain vendors, or if you book them for specific hour packages and not implementing that into your overall wedding day timeline. This also goes for your venue, making sure that you fully understand what your time constraints are there as far as setup and arrival time, as well as tear down, music off, having to vacate the premise and all of that. And finally, at number 7, not accounting for any location changes. So obviously, if you're doing a full location change, if you're having your ceremony in one venue and your reception in a completely different venue, you obviously want to account for the traveling from one to the other. But this also goes for events that are happening, both events happening in the same venue or the same space. It's likely not going to be, in the exact same spot. So if you're having a ceremony in one part of the property and your reception in the other, even though your ceremony is going to end, say you're starting at 4, you're going to have a 4:30 end time and then moving right into cocktail hour. You want to make sure that you're accounting for the time for your guests to get from the ceremony site to wherever the cocktail hour is taking place. And then again, from the cocktail hour to when guests are going to be seated for dinner, and make sure that you're accounting for that time so that's not just going one event to the next, and then from dinner into wherever the dancing is going to take place. Certain timeline piece might end at a specific time. It's not going to be like, okay, the toasts are over at 7:30, at 7:31 we're going to do our first dance. It's going to take some time to kind of flow through the movements, especially if you are changing locations a little bit, and just allow for time to kind of flow through each thing, if that makes sense. So make sure that you are accounting for if you have to move guests into any separate space or set up for something that's happening in a slightly different location. Creating a wedding day timeline is going to make your day run a lot smoother. Having the ability to share this with all of the not only vendors, but also your wedding party, parents, any important people that are going to be involved in your wedding day on the day of. Keeping everyone on the same page is going to make your life a lot easier. It's going to eliminate a lot of questions that you're going to be asked throughout the day and ensure that you can just kind of enjoy it a little bit more. So make sure, especially if you are not having a coordinator or wedding planner of any kind, that you are still taking the time to create your wedding day timeline. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.